these little kids getting into the bus. I was placed in St Joseph's Home, Ballarat, St Joey's as I call it. St Joey's was located in Sebastopol, west of Ballarat, and was run by the Sisters of Nazareth. St Joey's was a self-contained orphanage and had its own farm, cookhouse, gardens, and it supplied vegetables, milk to other institutions as well. There are three categories of kids in St Joey's. There were kids who came to St Joey's during the day for school. Then there was other ones that still had outside links with a relative, usually an aunt or an uncle, who used to come and see them every third Sunday of the month. Lastly, there were the kids that didn't have anybody outside at all that they could go out with. I was part of the last category with about 25 other kids. We were, as I always used to call them, the drones of St Joey's. We didn't go to school and we did all the work around the orphanage. Most of us didn't even know our full names. And we were just given a number. My name was 29 because that was my locker number. I didn't learn of my surname until I was 10 or 11 years old. When I started working, that's when I started working in the kitchen. Sister Reginald, who was in charge of the kitchen, said to me, "Not another hill." I didn't know what that meant until I found out later from other kids. The building at St Joey's had several wings and the children moved around to different parts of the building as they grew older. Boys and girls aged up to 5 years old were placed in the nursery. After they turned 5, the girls moved into Nazareth House, that's out at Renderee, while the boys stayed at St Joey's and lived in the other part of the building. Most of the nuns at St Joey's were cruel and harsh, with the exception of some. I remember there was 2 nuns that used to look after about 25 babies in the nursery wing that was built in the 1950s, who were strict but fair. For about 9 months, when I was around 9 years old, I used to help out in the nursery from the Friday until Sunday. I loved working over there. When I went over there, the kids would be screaming, little babies, but I would soon have them sitting around a circle, humming and clapping. These 9 months were the happiest time at St Joey's, but after that, it all went to shit. Excuse my expression. In those days, we were not allowed to know the names of the nuns or touch the nuns. We weren't allowed to look at the priests' faces at all. To touch a nun was considered the worst disrespect. One time, I helped one of the elderly nuns who had fallen over on some steps near the door going over to the chapel, and she hurt herself. This was one of the kinder nuns who used to give me jelly beans. 2 of the other nuns came out of the chapel, because they had their own chapel over there. As I was lifting her to help her to sit up, I got the thrashing of my life. and I got scars to prove it. There is no such thing as privacy in St Joey's. The bathrooms had communal showers along the wall, as well as toilets, sunken baths and a set of basins. There was also an extension fire hose next to the doorway. If we got caught in the bathroom doing something that the nuns thought we weren't supposed to be doing, on would go the fire hose, and you get squirted, and the force of a fire hose throw you against the wall. The children at St Joey's only had 2 sets of clothes. We had a Sunday best outfit to go to church in, plus shoes. And when we had then we had other working clothes, which were bib overalls, an old shirt and old coat, and sandals. Now the sandals used to be like the monks used to wear, old leather sandals, open toes. The sandals got worn out very quickly, and we only got 2 pairs a year. For 5 years plus, I had a pair of shoes with 2 right feet, because the left had been pinched by one of the other kids, and I only wore them when I had to. I still have trouble with my feet today because of the toes get squashed up. Labour and schooling at St Joey's. There was only a few paid staff at St Joey's. The drones, like me, had to do all the labour-intensive work. We had to clean all the classrooms, dormitories, dining rooms. We set the tables for breakfast, morning tea, lunch, afternoon tea and dinner. We served the meals, then we washed the dishes. In between that, we cleaned the floors, staircases, did the washing, did some more cleaning, had to do other things like in the gardens. Sometimes we were sent to clean the church at St Joey's because they had their own church. There was no schooling for the drones whatsoever. The only time I went into a classroom was to clean the blackboards and pick up the papers off the floor while the other kids went out to have morning tea. I did not learn how to read and write until I got out of that home many years later. When I went onto a farm and taught myself how to read and write, I still can't write fluently and have trouble with spelling. A lot of people do. Sexual abuse and the horror room. We had a parish priest who used to come to St Joey's. It was common for the priest to stay overnight on a Friday and Saturday nights and take confession on a Saturday evening and give Mass on Sunday morning. The priest used to sleep in one of the 2 rooms located downstairs alongside the outside door leading over to St Joey's Church. One of these rooms was a bathroom with a little alcove and a little day bed under the stairs. And then the other room was a bigger room. I call these rooms the horror rooms, because these rooms was that where I was abused in. I was first abused by a priest at St Joey's when I was around 5 years old. One day I was cleaning the tile staircase when one of the nuns grabbed me by the ears and said, "Father wants to cleanse you, 29. Horrible. I don't remember the name of this nun. I was thrown into one of the horror rooms where I was made to strip off and get into an old-fashioned small bath. A priest gave me a drink. I didn't know his name, but I remember that he looked as though he was in his 40s. After I finished the drink, I just bloody well blacked out. I don't know whether there was drugs in the drink, but I have no memory of what happened after that. When I came to, I heard like bloody hell. I was bleeding from the top of my back down to my shins. My genitals and my bottom were the worst. They hurt like they were on fire. I later discovered I had bite marks on my privates. I don't know how long I was out for it. When I woke up, the priest told me to get out and push me out the door, where the nun who had told me to go to the priest was waiting outside. She was laughing, big joke to her, and told me to get back to work, maybe because I was walking funny and my bum hurt so much. Then it gets worse. The confessional box. When I was a bit older, before I went to work at the nursery, I was chosen to be an altar boy. He would then make me sit on the floor beneath the padded bench in the confessional box. I used to enter the confessional box before the parishioners came in for Saturday night's confession. The priest used to come in and sit on the padded bench. He would pull me out by my hair and rub me, and I had to play with his genitals while he listened to confession. If I made a noise as I was sitting beneath the priest's bench in the confessional box, he would whack me across the face to shut me up. If any Catholics had known what was going on, they would have been horrified. If I may... 21. One of the things I noticed during the confession was the women got off lightly when getting absolution from the priest. The guys sometimes had to pay out money in order to get absolution. The priest told the men how much he wanted from them. He asked some of the guys for up to £5. In those days, it was a lot of money. I used to hear the person confessing slip through a piece of crinkly paper beneath the meshing that separated the priest and the public in the confessional box. The priest took the money and put it in his pocket. I could hear it crinkling. Mm-hmm. The sexual abuse I suffered when I was 5 years old was on for at least about 7 years. I was abused by 3 priests altogether, but I only remember this particular priest's name. When I was around 11 or 12 years old, I was put in the farm boys' dormitory. After this, the sexual abuse got worse. It started off as sexual abuse, but as I got older, it went on to the physical and dungeon type thing. The horror rooms, they had medieval paintings, a big wooden X cross on one wall. I used to be stripped down and tied up and sexually abused by it. During my time at St Joey's, priests normally stayed for about 6 months. I never knew why, I found out later. And then they were replaced by a new one. I couldn't understand why there was no permanent priest there. Physical punishment. The physical punishment at St Joey's was harsh. Sometimes the nuns would punish us by pulling a tooth out with a pair of pliers or whacking us across the face with an engineer's hammer, which broke a lot of our teeth. I even got scars to prove that. This happened to me a few times. On one occasion I was hit across the mouth for eating carrots from the garden I was weeding in with a lump of wood, and I still have the scars on my face. Later on in life, I went to a dentist to try and get new teeth. They cannot line the teeth up in my jaw, probably because the jawbone had been broken and the bones had been damaged. I got false teeth, but I never wear them, I can't. If we were naughty, or so they said, we were sometimes punished in what we used to call battle stations. In the hall, we would be stripped off in front of all the other kids and made to lie down on the ground. We were stretched out with a big kid on each arm and a kid on each leg and held up in the air. The nuns hit us with drill sticks. I don't know if you know what a drill stick is. In the army days, they used to be about 3 foot long and the size of a broom handle. They were about 1.5 metres long, or sometimes we would be hit with a small whip. I remember being punished for something I hadn't done. I was thrashed with a drill stick across the bare skin of my back and buttocks. About after 10 whacks, the drill stick broke. I still have scars on both sides of my torso because of the sticks broke on an angle. When I started to bleed on the back, they turned me around to the other side and whacked me again. I have the scars on my waist straight across from where I was beaten, and I was bruised everywhere. This is bloody hard. I made a mess on the floor because I was bleeding so much, and I was in trouble again. The nuns threw me in what they called a dungeon, or what we call a dungeon, which was a 4x4 room away from the orphanage down by the incinerator. That was where I was left with a bucket, a soundproof door, a light above me. There was no windows. For a bed, I had this long... For a bed, I had a concrete slab and 3 or 4 Hessian bags for blankets. I stayed down there for about a month. I knew it was a month because every Friday they used to burn the leftover papers from the orphanage school classrooms, and that was right alongside the dungeon. I'd hear the steel door opening and I could smell the smoke. Once when I was in the classroom dusting and cleaning the blackboards, some of the bigger kids came in and stripped me down. The nun in charge came in and saw me with no pants on, bare bum, no underpants in them days, and I got into trouble again, as usual. Aside from the physical and sexual abuse, I also suffered mental abuse at St Joey's. Once every 3 months we were paraded with about 5 or 6 other kids to see if we were eligible to be fostered out or adopted. I was always picked to stand in line when I was working, and I was in the dirtiest clothes of all. When I did not get picked, the nuns would turn around and say, "Nobody wants you, nobody cares about you. You're just a nobody." Telling the police. One day in the mid-50s, I was sent to the playground to get 2 or 3 other kids that hadn't come in for their afternoon tea. When I got to the playground, I saw them from in the distance, getting under the fence into a paddock. I was yelling out to these kids to come back, but they told me they were going to get blackberries. Because I like blackberries too, I followed them under the fence and picked blackberries in the wild blackberry bushes next door, next to the old-fashioned sewage dump. After finding an old jam tin and filling it up, after berry picking, the 3 kids came back to where I was, grabbed hold of me and threw me, and I knew I was in trouble because these were bigger kids and a couple of them were pets of the nuns. They told me that if I ever told the nuns where we had been, what we had been doing, I'd be in big trouble. They would pound the shit out of me. The kids grabbed hold of me and threw me in the blackberry bushes, which had huge thorns like roses. They left me there and headed back. By the time I got out of the bushes, my overalls were torn to pieces and I was cut. It was getting dark, so I tried to retrace my steps back to St Joey's by following the pathway in between the bushes. I spotted a dim light and thought I was heading in the right direction. I was walking towards the light, but it turned out it was a little hut where they used to clean the cans from the sewage. There was an old water tank, a basin and a bench. I went in and got a drink out of the tank. It tasted funny. I found out later it was bore water. It was getting dark, but the light of the hut at least let me see where I was. The weather was freezing. So I got up on the bench and there was 2 or 3 old bags on the bench which I got underneath and slept there for the night. I woke up with a very sore head and realised I was lying in a clean and comfortable bed. I never had one of them before. What I later learned was a Ballarat-based hospital. I must have fallen off the bench and hit my head because I had a headache or how I had bandages on my head. I heard the door open and a woman in white coat came in, followed by somebody in authority who was probably the matron, then a person in plain clothes and a policeman. This is harder than I thought. The woman in the white coat, who I think was the doctor, asked me how I got so bruised and battered at that stage. I had about 6 or 7 teeth missing. When they opened my mouth and looked inside, they couldn't work out how a kid could be like this, where the mouth was so badly damaged. They asked me why nobody had reported it. The doctor asked me my name and what had happened. All I could say was 29. As far as I was concerned, that was my name. She couldn't work out what this meant, and I said, "That's my name." I tried to tell him about the abuse, but it was pretty hard to do at the time because there was somebody in authority, and as kids we had to be careful what we said to people in authority. I tried to explain to them that I came from the home because I didn't know it was called St Joey's, that I was physically and sexually abused there, and how I'd gotten scars on my body. The copper in uniform turned around and said, "No, he's just a runaway kid that we've been looking for nearly 3 or 4 days," he said to the other people. Nobody does that sort of thing, the abuse. I know the home. I know because we've picked up runaways before. I said I wasn't running away. All I was trying to do is have a feed. He said to the other people, "You're wasting your time." From that day on, I trusted no one. At that time, I was talking to somebody in authority, somebody who you tell your kids they can look up to. But when you get that sort of reaction, that I did, it was like talking to a brick wall. A lot of people do not understand that anybody could do that sort of thing to a child, but it did bloody happen. When I came back to St Joey's, the guy in charge of the home, Don Warden, came to pick me up. He just threw me in the back of the old Chevy van. That's the van that they used to have. He was a real brute and so cruel. I just wanted to die. I was put in the sick bay in the orphanage where they tied me down on a bed and had pads on my head and neck with wires coming out. They put a catheter, I didn't know what it was at the time, but I know now. They put a catheter in me and then another tube in my bottom, so they didn't have to clean up the mess after me. There was a big light that shone into my face when I felt intense pain as my head bounced off the bed. Then I heard noises again, and I started to feel the pain again. It was like some sort of electric shock therapy. They wanted to know what I had told them at the hospital. To this day, I have never grown hair on the back part of my neck. I have long hair now, but that's to cover the hair that I can't grow. I don't know how many days that went on for. After that, I was taken down to the dungeon again by the incinerator and locked in a room made out of limestone. There was a thick door with a peephole and a slot down by the floor, and I had wheat bags for blankets. I got bread and water morning and night. Sometimes I could not eat because my teeth hurt so much, and I ended up feeding the bread to a little mouse. Oh, it was a little pet mouse I found. I was there for about over a month. Bloody cold down there too. There was no one in St Joey's that I could explain or complain to about the abuse. Home inspectors from the government used to come to St Joey's every 3 to 6 months. When they came, I was always hidden away with the other drones. We weren't allowed to speak or be anywhere near them. I knew they were coming because every time they came, I was one who had to arrange to make everything ready for the inspection. I had to spit and polish the 2 classrooms, and if the nuns saw a bit of dirt in there, I was in trouble again. On inspection day, the inspectors used to come down and they'd go through these 2 classrooms. I never saw them inspecting or talking to any of the kids. Then they go down to the nuns' parlour, have their scones and cream and jam. I knew about this because we used to cook for them. As kids, we were swept under the carpet, out of sight, out of mind. Once we became old enough, the nuns used to hire us out to the parishioners to do certain jobs. Sometimes kids were away on these jobs for 3 months or more. I was hired out to the church for 2 or 3 months at a time. I never got paid. I didn't know what money was for these jobs, but I presume St Joey's did. This is some of the places I went to. I travelled to Merbean, near Mildura, Wentworth, a sheep farm in Hamilton, an eel farm in Apollo Bay. In the 1950s, I was about 14 years old. I got sent to work at the priest's dad's place. The priest, this was the priest at the sex When I actually tied the door from the inside to keep it closed, they just got wire cutters and cut it open. I had a fold-down cot to sleep on. I used to try to think of other things while they were abusing me. I used to think about the babies. And the kids I helped look after at St Joey's, and try to put the abuse out of my mind. The worst part of this was when they were finished with me, my body would come back to reality, and I had to deal with this and what had happened. No one knew about what was happening because the place I worked at used to close at 6 o'clock. Everybody left at that time. Every now and again there would be some boarders and electricity workers that stayed over. Maybe they heard my screams, I don't know. There used to be an old blacksmith that lived with his wife in the lane at the back of the pub. They were very kind and helped me fix up an old bike that was in the shed. He tried to get me to talk about what was going on, but I clammed up. He said he had seen the marks on my arms and I was too ashamed to tell. Thinking he might think I'm dirty and I would lose a friend. I worked at this place for about 11 months until the priest's dad went into hospital and the pub closed down. I had to stay at the priest's sister's place nearby for about a weekend while the priest then picked me up and took me back to the home. Finding my family. In all the time I was at St Joey's, I had no idea I had 2 brothers and 2 sisters. I later found out that I had an older brother and a younger brother who went into St Joey's at different times to me. I also had 2 sisters who were in Nazareth House in Wendouree. The nuns did not tell me I had brothers at St Joey's while I was there. When I was about 15 or 16, another kid who I later learned was my younger brother came up to the farm and told me to come down to the house to meet this other woman. I didn't know I had a mother, so I stayed there. I stayed where I was. Don Warden then came up and told me Sister Reginald, Don Warden then came up and took me to Sister Reginald. She hosed me down and changed, well, she didn't change me clothes, but I changed clothes and took me to the nuns' parlour where a woman was waiting with 2 nuns and now my younger brother that I didn't know at the time. About 2 years later, that woman came back to St Joey's to try and get my brother out of St Joey's. She couldn't take him because he was tied up with the welfare system. So I went to live with that woman instead. Somewhere along the line, I slipped under the couch. I slept in a cot in the lounge room because it was only a 2-bedroom place with that woman, her new husband and 2 boys who were my half-brothers. I later found out that my sister started doing some family research after she finished school. This is from Nazareth House. She found our mother in Echuca, who was a counsellor, a justice of the peace, head of the Scouts in Echuca. My sister practically told her to do something about the kids or else she would let everyone know what she did to us. Not bad for somebody who was head of the community. 3 weeks after I moved in with that woman, I got a job at the ordnance factory. I worked there for about 3 years. I learned by observing other guys that worked, so I could pick up skills from them. I used to think, I can do better than that, quicker than that, and that was how I learnt and survived. When they paid my wages, I didn't even know about money. When they paid my wages, my mother kept the notes and told me that she put it in my bank account, and all I got was a small change. I used to keep the change and throw it in a tin because not having gone to school, I didn't know really what money was or how to spend it. She opened up an account in the bank for me under, what do they call it? Like a guidance. Somebody I can't think of the word. But she had control over the money that was in the bank because I couldn't read or write, so I couldn't open the bank account. I was too young. I ran away from that home many times. When I ran away, I used to hide. I was virtually a street kid. But I still went to work every day and was always up early in the morning. I couldn't stand the other half-brothers that I found out I had, as they used to cut the toes of my socks off. And I had to go to work with no toes in my shoes. I got blamed for everything that went wrong in that house because I was an outsider. I found out later that that woman had told my half-brothers that I was a friend's adopted kid that she was looking after for a bit to help her out. After I finished my job at the ordnance factory, I got a job on the farm, and that suited me right down to the ground. Because I was out there for about 6 years, I only used to come into town once every 3 months. Suited me. My pay would go straight into a bank account. One day, my boss asked me, "You can't read and write, Hilly. Why don't you bloody well learn?" He took me into an ABC shop, and I picked up a set of books with attached cassette tapes so that I could teach myself how to read and write. Since I had never been taught at St Joey's. Impact of abuse. When I got out of St Joey's, I did not have any social skills whatsoever. And I couldn't relate to people. I used to hide myself away. I felt like an outcast because of all. I felt like an outcast because of all the rejections I got at St Joey's. I could never smile when I was young. I was always in the background, wearing dark clothes like a wallflower. Look at what I got on. Like a wallflower in the corner. I'd go into my own shell. It took a lot of years to come out. But the nightmares never stopped. I sometimes get into a mindset and think, how in the hell did I ever survive all that happened to me? I really don't know. But I did try and put myself in a different place where I worked up to 18 hours a day. People said I was a workaholic, which may be so. But through working such long hours, I tried to block everything out. I married my wife when I was 28. We buried this sort of stuff way down. Before my wife died, one of the last things she said to me was that one day she hoped that one day I could tell my story somewhere, start writing it and putting it on paper so that other people and my kids would understand. I think my wife knew a little bit about what happened to me, but I used to keep it hidden pretty well. When I started writing my story on my computer, I could only do it for half an hour at a time because it took me right back to that time and it would be very painful. It has taken me 50 years to start to frequently stop because my eyes would start to swell up and tears would trickle down my cheeks. I still have difficulty going to bed at night and sleeping because the memories come flying back at me. Most of the jobs I have had were night shift work, so I could nap in the day as I have trouble sleeping at night. It was hard, but I got by. The smell of certain things can take me right back to those days or those times. Hair products like Californian poppy, Brill cream remind me of the priest. Diesel can take me back to when I was 5 years old because of the horror room smell like diesel kerosene. Takes me back when I was 7.5 years because one of the workers on the farm used to use it in the boiler room. The smell of stale beer takes me back to the time working at the priest's place, Dad's place. I shudder every time I smell beer. I don't drink. I relive these things all the time. One of the things I used to think when I was young was get away from the place as far as possible. So I did. I moved over to Western Australia, but it never gets away from the mind. It doesn't matter how far you go, you always take your memories with you. This is a good part. Many years my wife and I started helping foster children. Some were ex-orphanage kids who didn't have a job. I got them off the drugs and booze, found them jobs. I let them stay with us. In 6 months, stay with us in 6 months. Some of these kids had, by this time they left us, in 6 months some of these kids had houses of their own. Some of them got married. Some went to back to an organisation called Vanish. That's how I got hold of them once. which led to more children coming to us. I don't know how the heck they got my bloody address. Because Vanish is in Victoria and I'm in Western Australia. Vanish system provided an opportunity to take state wards, reach out to other state wards who may have needed help. Over the years, my wife and I helped 26 foster children, which is a record of its own. Just a little bit of help for other people that needed help. I sometimes think back and wonder how I came to be where I am today, after what I went through. I've seen a lot of people who went through the system, who have committed suicide or on drugs, who live on the streets or are in jail. I often wonder what had happened to them. Last year, I was awarded the Paul Harris Fellow Award. Very proud of that. Just goes to show what you can make of yourself. Which is an award from the Rotary International Rotary Club for my volunteer work with cancer patients. I run the Cancer Self-Help and Wellness Centre at Gidgegannup in Western Australia. And I have got proof that I'm not forgotten. And now, because of all the achievements I have made over the years, I'm a survivor. Before that, I was just a pawn. I want to make sure that kids who were sexually abused are not forgotten anymore. Somebody has to have a voice. This is one of the reasons I spoke to the Royal Commission. I want to speak on their behalf. These kids, because they haven't got a voice. I now have support from Find and Connect, which is Relationships Australia in Western Australia. Also with Open Place over here. Without these groups, I would not have made it. They have meant that there is a friendly face when I open the door and somebody who understands what I've been through. I have now got a voice that I didn't have before. They made a monster out of me. I hope that groups like these will continue to be supported in the future. I would like the government to start paying back victims at St Joey's. The government inspectors would come, only see one classroom. They only saw the good side of St Joey's, but they did not see the poor kid who was scrubbing the stairs, or the white hands and white knees he had from cleaning the staircases because of the white king. I hate that stuff. It makes me puke. They never actually saw the conditions we lived in. We were isolated. Foster families now are a lot different to what we used to go through. The church. The Catholic Church should be turned upside down. They made riches out of us. It's time they come out from behind the robes and pay out the poor they have robbed for so long. Has anybody, and I mean anybody, bothered to do a count on how many of us forgotten ones died of broken hearts from drugs, alcohol and suicides. I bet they haven't. They would run out of paper.
Thank you, Mr Hill.
Does anyone have any questions of Mr Hill?
I just have a single question, if I may, Your Honour. I'm Mr Hill's legal representative, Martine Marek. Mr Hill, did you want to say anything further to the Commission about what you're hoping to achieve by giving your evidence? Yeah,
I'd like the Commission, with their recommendations, when they do a final report, for kids that are on, some of us are still on the street. I'm been fortunate enough to have good health, and I'm not too bad at 72, so I'm still in pretty good nick. As I say, I'm as fit as a mallee bull. But there's other kids and a lot of other people that need not only medical help, they need support, they need, it's counselling. My way of thinking of how I do my counselling to bring me out of the doldrums is I meditate of a night time. Take 20 minutes of time, go into a quiet room and meditate, and that gets me by. But the church must pay. They say they're not on identity, but when they sell a place, the money goes to the church, so they are. So in legal terms, if they can pick up their money from when they sell something, they are a legal identity. So as far as the law is concerned, they should be sued. The state government I'm going after because their inspectors did not do their job. I've got records, 5 pages of records of 15 years in that home. No school records. Was a good boy or bad boy? Nothing. They should be brought into task. So when the state government says, we can't afford it, we didn't know any better, stiff pickies as far as I'm concerned.